Hi, I'm Gavin from KindHuman, and this is the KindHuman Cycling Show. Today we have Matt Kadey on the show, and we're going to be talking to him about the Butter Tart 700. So, Matt, what is the BT700?
Okay, good summary is just the BT700 is a predominantly off-road cycling route in Ontario. So I guess we'll say southwest Ontario. Um, so BT stands for Butter Tart because they're the most ubiquitous treat you can have on the route. So I wanted something with a good rallying cry, and the Butter Tart was there. And the 700 was the original kind of distance, 700 kilometers, but with some additions, we're looking at a 770 kilometers. But what's an extra 70 kilometers when you're out there having fun? So yeah, the BT 700, and that's what that stands for.
And so, how did this all get started?
Well, I think a lot of people have taken notice that bikepacking has become really popular now as people new kind of equipment has become available, and also people are seeking to explore roads and trails that don't have um, vehicles on them in a way to see new landscapes. So as you know, as I explored more in Ontario, I realized that we had a lot of that potential. There's just so much gravel roads and so many trails, but there really wasn't too many established routes. So it just kind of dawned on me, one ride to start trying to piece together everything and see what came out. And yeah, and eventually it all worked out as a loop, and um, it came to be that way. So it was a combination of both being so popular bikepacking and the fact that I knew that there was an appetite for that in Ontario, but people didn't really have an avenue to go out and explore the bike packing without going to out west, because there are a lot of bike packing routes out in the west of America and Canada, or internationally. There's a lot more growing that way, but I found a lot of people wanted to do more exploring close to home. So yeah, that was the motivation as well.
So, is this something that people can do on their own? Do they do it in groups? How does that work?
Yeah, there's two ways to do it. It's what I call an open sourced route. So the route is there on the website. Anyone can ride it at any time they like. And also in July, we have what's called a Grand Depart, where a lot of people come together and ride the routes. Not necessarily as one big group, but we all leave at the same time on a day. And it just creates a really beautiful and amazing atmosphere. So a lot of that's become more popular as well, as what's called as Grand Departs. Is just to bring a group together of like-minded people looking to explore a new area. So we do that in July as well.
Okay. And so, what kind of level of rider does one need to be in order to do this? And then how long, like how many days would it typically take?
Okay, that's a really good question. I think if you're going to try this, I think it's a good idea to have some experience with off-road cycling on a gravel bike or a mountain bike, just because there's some rough sections, and it's quite long. So the more comfortable you are with that, the more easily the whole route's going to be cycled. But I think it also becomes mental as well. I find a lot of times, the mental aspect of bikepacking gets overlooked. So that's, I think, just as important as the physical aspect. Just how people, when it's inevitably stuff is going to go wrong. So it's kind of how people deal with that to get through the route. Um, so I would say kind of maybe more intermediate to even advanced riders will definitely find this to be a challenging route and like that. And for this time, it ranges. I mean, last year's Grand Depart, we saw the fastest rider come in at an unbelievable 44 hours, which is insane. But people spend a week out there and really, really enjoy it. They're just out there at a touring pace, and in some ways, those are the people that actually enjoy it the most, because they're just being more casual, they're stopping more often, and they're just enjoying kind of the natural surroundings. So it varies from like, yeah, like the 2 day to 7 day type of range.
2 days.
It's insane,
That's
yeah. And it was Kyle Messier from here in Kitchener, but he would have actually been even a little faster, but he was so tired and got a little kind of turned around at the end and a little lost and frustrated. But yeah, I'm not sure. We'll see if someone gets closer to that time. It's a little longer the route this year, so it's even more of a challenge.
so then you're doing is so if it's 700 kilometers and you break that over 7 days, that's 100 kilometers a day.
Yeah, so
How
even if you did it at 7 days, it's still like, how often do people ride 100 kilometers every day for 7 days straight?
yeah.
So it's still a challenge even at 7 days.
So then if you were to do it as 7 days, like, so most of the Kind Human community is road cyclists, cross and gravel.
Mhm.
Um, we were talking to Jose, who did this last year. He has one of our bikes, and he was saying there's a lot of mountain bikey terrain. So I guess how many hours a day do most people spend doing this? And follow-up question is get into like what kind of bike is ideal.
Yeah, those two good questions again. I think the time varies. It's some people who, like me, I'm not really a big night rider, so it'd be like the typical kind of 7 a.m. to, depending on the type of year, like 7 a.m. You have light until in June or whatever, till 9 p.m. People will ride all that time, or shorter when the fall becomes. So, the 8 hour type of workday out there. The Grand Depart, I think a lot more people are kind of, testing themselves. So there's a lot of um, 24-hour plus days. Yeah. So I
Wow.
saw a lot of that. Like, you could follow the dots, which is important, like on the track leaders, and you could see like people just keep going throughout the night. And I'd wake up in the morning and check, and they've already moved like, you know 100 kilometers since I went to bed. So it really, really varies quite a bit on the time of that. And the ideal bike, I would say, yeah, I would, it's you can make an argument that the hardtail mountain, the old school hardtail mountain bike might overall provide the most comfort. But a lot of people have also done it on gravel bikes. Um, the one stipulation I would say there is, try to make, if you're doing it on a gravel bike, try to have the most rubber that you can fit in
Okay.
your frame or on the wheels, just for the added comfort there. Um, I remember seeing a few people show up at the Grand Depart last year with like 32 tires and and like that, and I thought, well, they're gonna definitely get beaten up on some of the more unmaintained roads and the trails like that. But again, the two fastest times last year at the Grand Depart were on 700
Okay.
700 wheels. So it
And
can be,
what would the minimum tire size be that you would recommend for somebody?
I would say maybe 38s probably, which
Okay.
a lot of gravel bikes could take those now. That's not really that fat, but anything lower than that, you might walk a little more, which some people don't mind on some of the more kind of rocky stuff. And if it starts to rain, that's always going to be a little bit of an issue with the mud, for
Okay.
sure.
So what
Yeah.
percentage would you estimate is on road versus more mountain bike trail terrain?
I would say there's no more than 15 to 20% of pavement. So
Okay.
that leaves, about 80% more off-road touring. Um, of the 80%, I would say at least 40%. I mean, I'm just kind of grasping at numbers here, but at least 40% on your are more kind of your traditional gravel roads
Yeah.
that we're a little more used to, and then maybe the remainder would be a combination of forest trails, double track, and also what's called unmaintained, or road allowances. So those are like kind of the forgotten type of roads that are in varying conditions that are kind of, you feel like you're a little more in the backcountry with those. And it was really my goal to seek out those as well, because those are places that people never even thought about going to kind of go explore, and don't see a lot of cyclists. So myself and some other people kind of really enjoy that type of exploratory riding.
So I take it you've done a tremendous amount of bike packing.
Yeah, I mean, I've been at it for more than 20 years, but it was always called cycle touring, which I still call it. So, bike packing is a kind of a newer term. So when my girlfriend and I go traveling, at least once a year, we go traveling by bicycle. We might use the word bike packing now because it's cooler and it gets more interest, but we're still believe that it's also cycle touring. Like you're traveling by bicycle. So whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But only, yeah, definitely in the last few years, we've really kind of focused a little more on trying to find more of the off pavement kind of style of touring and the gravel riding. We're just really enjoying that type of traveling and exploring those type of areas that you can get to, not always on pavement.
So how many times have you done the full 700 kilometers of this?
Only once. So to scout it, we kind of did a lot of scouting missions, like piecing everything together. And then I pieced it as a route. And then last spring, I was able to actually get out there and ride the whole thing. And which is a whole different experience to piece it all together and do it all at once. It was just like, I was so pleased how it kind of all came together, and how challenging the route could be, and how beautiful the route could be. People kept telling me they couldn't believe how beautiful that part of Ontario can be.
So where in Ontario is this?
So it starts in the village of St. Jacobs, which I think is probably an hour west of Toronto. Kind of a touristy little town.
That's near Kitchener, right?
Yeah. So we live in Waterloo, so it's kind of a bit closer to us. From there, it goes towards Lake Huron, which is up by Singhampton and Port Elgin. And then it slowly makes the loop over through to Owen Sound. And then when it goes through all the escarpment country down through Beaver Valley, up towards Collingwood area there. And then from there, it goes south back towards Mono, before heading back west toward around the Elora, Fergus area, and then coming back to St. Jacobs. So you get a lot of variety of terrain. It's a lot flatter as you get towards Lake Huron, but once you get into like the
So we broke up there for a second. You were talking about where you finish up and everything.
Yeah, so it's start and end in St. Jacobs from there.
Okay.
So
so how many people have actually finished the full route?
well, that's a good question. The full route, I would say maybe 50 or so riders. So I would say the success rate's about 50% for various reasons. A lot more people, I think it seemed like more people were able to finish it during the Grand Depart, but I think that's just the competitive nature of everyone.
Yeah.
If everyone else is finishing it, I got to finish it too. But yeah, I think there's two issues. Some people think they're going to do it faster than they will. So they haven't left themselves enough time and they have to like abandon because they got to be back to work the next day. Or some people underestimate kind of how challenging the whole thing can be. So maybe they haven't done enough kind of preparation for that way, and they get into it and then they realize that maybe I'll come back and try it a different time when I'm a little more, my gear is a little better or my physical fitness is a little better as well.
So do
some
you,
people,
I was just
people
going to
go
ask
out
you
there
if
on
you,
their own.
I was going to ask you,
Yeah.
do you encourage anybody to intentionally do a smaller portion of the route as opposed to the full route?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things. I now have what I call the BT7 Lite, which takes out a bit of section of the really, really more challenging part that people can find on the website if they want something a little easier. And also, people have a route file that has a bunch of detours that people can take if if they need to shorten the route or take some easier sections if they feel like they've gotten a little over their head with the whole thing. And I should also mention I've built another route that starts and also ends in St. Jacobs, but goes in a different area. And that one's just 350 kilometers. So that could be more of like a long weekend project
Mm.
with someone. They can, I think it's a little more introductory, that route. So that gives people something also that they can try as well.
That would be really helpful for a lot of people, probably myself included.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely. Because I know like the full BT700 is definitely like it's a pretty big undertaking. Yeah, for sure.
so,
So
what kind of advice would you give to people if they're thinking about doing this, but they're curious as if they're able physically to do it? How do you make
advice.
that call? How do you make that call between I know I'm ready to do this or not?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. I think a little bit of experimenting, I think, would help. Like I mean, I encourage people just to try an overnighter or something, just to see how that goes. And kind of, I mean, there's a lot of material out there on bikepacking now, so that can help people. But I also just say, if you think you kind of can do it and ready to do it, and mentally you're ready, go out there and try it. I mean, if it doesn't work out 100%, that's no big deal. Just, I mean, it never works out 100% for any of us, even us most people who've been doing it for so long. Um, and yeah, it's amazing to see what people can accomplish. I mean, I remember at the Grand Depart, people were doing like 300-kilometer days, and the longest they'd ever done before was 100 kilometers. I guess it was just, a sense of pushing themselves, and they were so happy with what they were able to accomplish. So, um, but that doesn't diminish that you really should do a little bit of preparation for it. Make sure you have the right gear and you have some degree of kind of physical. If you've just been sitting on the couch for a month and you have like you're not your gear isn't in good working order, it might be not the best idea to go and jump into something like that.
Well, I like your idea of trying an overnighter first, as a
Hmm.
minimum. That
Yeah, and
way,
that's become more popular.
yeah, because if you're out there for this, you're going to be out there for more than one night,
Yeah.
and that gives you a way to practice. How do you carry all your gear? How do you set up your tents? How do you deal with camping and all of those things beyond the riding? So that's really good advice.
Yeah, and for example, I had one rider who made it up to Thornbury last year, but it was having I think it was really severe knee problems or whatever. So he's re-signed up this year, and told me that his bike fit was so off that he thinks that was contributing to the problem. So just that's an example of kind of doing a little bit of homework. Sometimes can help for.
Yeah. So, and then as far as safety goes, you're out there in the wilderness on your own. Is there cell phone coverage throughout the whole route? Do people need satellite phones? How do you make sure that you're safe if something does go wrong?
Yeah, there's two. I don't think there's cell phone coverage everywhere. This is still Ontario, so we don't have. I'm sure there's some definitely wilderness areas where there isn't. I haven't tested that, but
Yeah.
I can say great confidence that it wouldn't be 100%. So some people do different ways. You can get like trackers now, like spot meters that people have, and that has um, you have your SOS button for something like that. And it's also, you can have a loved one follow you throughout the whole route. So some people, use those as kind of a backup safety thing like that.
Okay.
Mhm.
And
The
then
good
if
thing
some,
about this route is that it's kind of, sometimes there are some remote areas, but you're never really that far from civilization. So it's not like you're going to have to pedal 100 kilometers to find find the next human being.
so to deal with that level of safety, are you assuming that people have enough experience that they know how to deal with these things, or do you provide any extra resources to help people with that?
Yeah, I definitely encourage people to ask me questions about that. Um, the one thing I always tell people, you're 100% responsible for your own safety out there. It's not an organized route. It's not a supported route. So that I want people to kind of take a little pause and consider that a bit. It's like, okay, so I'm going to be out there a lot, and maybe some people go out there totally on their own without a riding partner. So how do I deal with those situations? Uh, for example, when I went out in June, I did it really on my own, and we had a really wet spring. There was one area where it was raining, and it was like kind of like a river kind of going down the trail. So I stopped and said, there's no one out here. There's going to be no one coming for a long time. Something happened. So I just got off and walked. So that was my decision to take that a little easier than I might have in a group, or if it wasn't raining or something like that.
Yeah.
So
One
just
of
being smart about decisions like that.
Yeah, so one, very clearly, if you are going to do this, you are 100% responsible for your own safety. Another tip that I've gotten from somebody about, I got this more from backcountry skiing, was go in groups of three. That way, if one person gets injured, there's somebody to stay with the injured person and another person to try and get somewhere where you can get help. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
And if you're going to go on your own, I mean, definitely some people consider like the trackers kind of as a kind of an emergency kind of tool there for sure as a backup.
And so, where would somebody kind of get one of those trackers?
They're available readily. I think one of the most popular ones is the spot meter with that. And I know Garmin has a device as well. I think it's called an InReach. Don't quote me on maybe I got the name of that wrong, but that definitely has a satellite kind of thing. And they run on, some of them run on batteries, so you don't have to kind of really worry about, the charge going down too much. So
Yeah, these
I
things are
know,
all.
like,
Go
there's
ahead.
a
Go
very
ahead.
popular race in the States called the Continental Divide.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you have to have one of those devices because it would just be silly to go out there without that.
Yeah, and these things are really designed for backcountry environments where you don't have the ability to recharge, and they use a little energy and last for long periods of time.
Yeah, and they've gotten better over the recent
Yeah.
years like that. So, and I think people just assume that this is Ontario, so it's, there's it's not a big deal. But I think a lot of people finish the route and they're like, wow, there's a lot of places where there's just, there's really no one around.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it really doesn't take that far to get, depending on where you are, even in Ontario, to really get out into the wilderness. So,
Yeah, for sure.
so my most important question of the day:
Okay.
best butter tart in Ontario. Where do we get it?
Oh, wow. I think, okay, so there are a few there. Obviously haven't tested them all, but I think there's a little country market called Giffin's Country Market up in Glen Huron, which is by Creemore, and they pride themselves on making an incredible butter tart. And then most people who stop there agree. And they're one of the cheaper places as well. Unlike in Creemore, which is a little more touristy and a little more expensive. Um, so yeah, I think that's probably one of the all-star places on the route.
Well, Creemore is really not that far from Toronto, so I think I'm going to have to ride out there and test
Yeah,
that before I commit to the full 700.
and it's actually a good training ground because they have incredible like gravel road areas up there, and they're hilly, so that's really really a great place to kind of to test the fitness and the and the gear up there, because it's one of my favorite areas of the route. There's just so much open gravel trail type of riding in that area.
Fantastic. So where would somebody go to learn more about this, to get started, find out all the details? How does that work?
Yeah, they can go to the website, which is BT700.ca, so not com.ca. And that has all the route info along with like tips and everything like that. There's also a forum on the website that people can ask questions. There's a contact page that you can ask questions for me. Anyone who's interested in joining the Grand Depart July, assuming that it's still going on in July with these crazy times right now, there's a sign up there as well. And yeah, so far that we have 100 riders signed up for July, so that's pretty amazing. And the atmosphere last year was really quite special, so hoping to repeat that this year.
That's awesome. So that Grand Depart starts in St. Jacobs?
Yep, July 12th at 8 a.m. July 11th, the night before, we'll have like a get together in the town at one of the breweries there, and yeah, hoping to make it a whole kind of weekend kind of event there, and then see how it goes from there. And also this year, for the first time, I'm offering where people can do that secondary loop that I mentioned. That goes around kind of like Dundas area. So you can finish the BT700, and then if you have more energy, you really have more time on your hands, you can actually go and do the extra loop for what I'm calling the BTXL. So that would be over 1,100 kilometers of bikepacking kind of riding.
Wow.
Yeah, it'd be
I
pretty
can't,
wild and insane.
I can't even comprehend that.
Yeah, yeah. So, but that's where the mental becomes, because you finish the BT700 and you come back to St. Jacobs and your car might be there, or you live right near that area, and you're like, oh, do I really want to go back out there and do another 350 kilometers? So, yeah,
Well,
the
thank you
challenge
so
is there for anyone who wants it.
thank you so much for being on our show today.
Yeah,
I know this is a bucket list event for me that
yeah,
I got a lot of training to get up to. So if anybody out there is going to be doing it this year and you want to share your story with us at Kind Human, I'd love to hear how you prepare, what goes through your mind, and the experience on this. As I said earlier, we had a customer, my friend Jose, who did this last year on one of our bikes, and I remember he got back and he's like, I don't want to see a bike again. Um, and then he healed up and he's calling me, let's go for a ride. And
yeah, for sure. It's always like,
yeah,
just a quick note, like at the finish line last year, there were so many people that were like kind of miserable. I mean, they overall enjoyed it, but it was just like you're tired and you're like, you see people's Strava thing is like, oh man, I can't take this anymore, or I don't want to be. But then like a day later, they're like, oh, it's awesome. And I
yeah.
got so many people re-signing up this year, so it's like it's just the way it goes. If there's not enough suffering, then it's not really doing its job properly.
Well, thank you, Matthew. I really appreciate you sharing what you've done with the cycling community. Um, you're not making any money off this, from what I understand. And this
No.
is purely something you're just doing to help out, which is really, really cool. And we all appreciate that. And thank you for sharing your experience with us. This is super cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again.
Talk to you soon. So Matt and I are back for one more bonus tip. We were just talking about tire sizes, and I asked the question about 650 versus 700C wheels. Matt, what do you say?
If you can, go with the 650Bs, because you'll feel a lot more confident and comfortable over the long haul. I tried that for the first time in Colombia for a 1,600 kilometer bike packing trip, and most of the time I was thinking, oh, I'm much more happy on the 650Bs than the 700s. So yeah, I don't know, like, if you had like a 650B times 47 wheel tires or something like that, that could be a fairly good choice.
That's good
And
to
also
know.
you need
Yeah,
some comfortable gearing as well.
yeah. So that's
Yeah.
good to know, because for any of our customers looking to do this on our gravel bike, the doing a 650 is the way to go. So we can help you with that. And
Yeah, perfect. That's good to know.
yeah, awesome. So thank you. We're signing off again
Okay.
this time officially. Bye now.